Hi, 大家好. This is Jamie Roof from Chinese Business Breakthroughs, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy days to listen to this interview. Today, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Zach Haney. Zach is a veteran China expat who has lived in China for nearly the past 15 years, and he has tons of experience helping Western companies set up factories and supply chains in China. In this interview, you're going to learn how to leverage your Chinese business relationships with your customers, suppliers, and business partners into more business opportunities. Let's get right into the interview. Hey Zach, how's it going?
Hey Jamie, it's been a while since I've actually had a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
What are you up to?
Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with me. I'm sure our listeners are going to have a lot to benefit from all your years of living and working in China.
Well, hopefully.
So let's get started. I'm sure let's just start with the basic stuff. So, at this point, how many years have you been living in China?
I've been here for quite a while now. I've actually been in China since 2000, and I've pretty much been here full time the entire time. So we're looking on 14, coming up on 15 years now.
Wow. And so, all this time have you been doing like one kind of job, or what kind of stuff have you done?
Well, I've jumped around from different types of jobs, but the one that I spent most of my time in is actually the manufacturing and basically helping people in the United States communicate in China.
And is that what you do currently?
Yes, right now I'm working with probably about two or three different companies in the U.S. and I help them out over here, and then also I have a few other smaller projects that I'm just kind of trying to get underway and get going. Mostly, actually, all of them have to do with manufacturing.
Okay. And when you say you help out these companies, what does that mean?
That really depends. It depends on the client that I'm actually dealing with, because in some cases it might be that I'm helping them actually source the factories that they need, and then also helping them do all the communication because there are companies that are dealing with factories that they've known here in China for a while, and they just need somebody to help facilitate with some of the orders that are coming through if things are getting busier, if they've had a recent expansion in the number of products that they're doing, and they just need somebody there on the ground to be able to help them out. Then I fill in with that as well.
Okay. So I imagine this goes without saying, but in your 14, 15 years of doing this in China, I imagine you've rubbed shoulders quite often with Chinese businessmen and other companies, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do on a daily basis. And all levels of businessmen too, because you have people who run like subcontracting factories where you have to go out and you have to spend time with them and get to know them. Then also some of the larger bosses from some of these factories, which are pretty large factories, pretty substantial players.
And I remember you quite frequently are out on business trips, visiting factories, visiting these locations, correct?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time actually running around two factories, probably at least 2 or 3 days a week. I'm usually out running around somewhere or meeting with somebody. And then I have the rest of the time to be able to try and catch up on what I need to with office work and any other design work or things that I'm working on.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure you're going to have some very valuable advice for our listeners here. So, what are some of your personal business accomplishments in your time in China?
Business accomplishment wise, probably some of the bigger ones are I deal with a small company in the United States who have patents on a few different products, and then they manufacture for much larger companies in the United States. And when they needed help, they actually came to me, and I did essentially set up their entire supply chain. I found the factories that they're going to work with. I oversee the production, I oversee the logistics, and I basically make sure that the orders for these companies get out on time. And it's a pretty significant company and a pretty significant amount of manufacturing that we actually cover for them.
Oh, I can imagine. And setting up a supply chain is no small feat, especially in China.
No, it definitely requires a lot of work, and you have to be checking on things all the time, especially if you're working either by yourself or with a with a very small team of people.
Absolutely. So, in your 14, 15 years, I imagine you have personally experienced some, let's just say, blunders or mistakes, while trying to set up some of this business, and I'm sure you've also heard stories from some of your friends. So, in your opinion, what are probably the three biggest mistakes that Westerners and foreigners make when doing business in China?
Probably one of the biggest ones is people never really realize the amount of time that it's going to take to be able to get things done. Um, Things always take longer than you think they're going to. There's always going to be some catch, some snare, something that's going to hold you back and take a little bit longer. So whatever that you think you're going to need, you should probably have at least an extra 50% in there just as some sort of cushion. If you don't need it, great, then you can get stuff out on time. And obviously what I'm talking about right now is setting up new products, new designs, new styles. If it's something where you're just reordering and reordering, then that's a different story. Another thing is you have to really make sure you take the time to set things up at the beginning. And the way that I like to talk about it is I think of doing factories here in China and doing business with factories here in China is kind of like you aiming a gun. If you aim it the right way and you point it in the right direction, then when you pull the trigger, it's going to hit the target. But the problem is a lot of people don't take the time to be able to aim it properly, and then they pull the trigger, and then it just ends up way off target, and then they wonder what the heck happened.
Yeah, I've personally heard some horror stories about people, especially starting businesses, say with the wrong partners, and either they end up getting screwed or everything just falls apart.
Yeah, that actually happens quite often. And the thing is, ultimately, anytime you're going to be doing business here, the responsibility for how things are communicated and whether or not the factory is clear about exactly what you want, that's ultimately the responsibility of the person that's in between. The factory will always be able to push off and say, hey, look, this is the information that I was given. Don't expect people to think creatively or actually try to problem solve on their own.
Okay.
It's all kind of involved in the same thing. And then the one other thing I want to make sure that people in the States realize is that Chinese New Year happens every single year. I don't know how many times I've dealt with companies that are big companies and they're doing business here in China all the time. And every year when it gets to Chinese New Year, they're just kind of like, what? You guys are taking a month off? No, that's one of the other things you have to remember. If you're doing business here, that's going to happen every year, and you need to plan for that in advance.
Absolutely, and I think this is where a basic understanding of, let's just say, the Chinese calendar and the culture can certainly, help, a Western company in business.
Yeah.
So, following up on that question, what do you think are three essential things that maybe people don't realize they need to know to do successful business in China?
Well, one of them is pretty basic, but it's still something that ends up being an issue a lot of times. And the first one is going to be pay on time. Um, so many of these factories, they are constantly working with people to get credit. They're trying to get credit from their subcontractors. If you can actually come up and you can pay on time and make sure everything is there and they have their cash, they're going to be much more likely to want to try and take care of you because they realize, hey, this guy's going to pay me right away and he's getting me all the money and there's no questions, no problems. If you're able to do that, that's going to help you immensely. Another problem is or another thing you need to pay attention to is you need to make sure that you find the right factory for what you're doing. There are some factories out there that are these huge, great factories, and they're amazing when you walk in. They're absolutely amazing, just the way that they work and the output that they have. But you really need to look at the scale of what you're doing. You want to make sure that you are a big client for a smaller factory rather than a small client for a big factory, because then you're going to get more of the attention that you actually deserve, and you're going to be able to leverage that relationship a little bit.
Right, and especially if you end up having to a lower status relationship with a big factory, as you say, you end up getting squeezed for price and priority, and it just doesn't work out great.
Well, the biggest thing actually is going to be is going to be the priority, because price, a lot of times you have a little bit of leeway back and forth. Obviously, you want to try and control it as much as you can, but if you're not getting the responses that you need from people and in the times that you need to get responses from people, then you start having a big problem, because once you actually do commit to putting in orders, you've committed to your clients in the United States, your customers, and if things are getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back simply because they don't feel that you're a priority, that's going to be a huge issue for you.
Absolutely. So let's kind of take a different angle here now in this conversation. So Zach, can you speak Chinese?
Yeah, as I like to tell people, I know enough to get by.
I think that's a bit of an understatement from what when I last heard you speak. But on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being or 1 being pure beginner and 10 being near native, where would you fall on that scale?
I'm gonna group things a little bit differently. I'm gonna at least split them a little bit differently when it comes to say pronunciation and fluidity with what I actually do have. I'd probably rate myself around a 7 or an 8.
Okay.
If we're talking about overall comprehension of and vocabulary and things like that, I'd probably rate myself a little bit lower, probably about like a 5 or 6.
Okay. And in your opinion, especially from all your years of doing business in China, interacting with these businessmen in factories, do you think being able to speak some level of Chinese is beneficial for doing better business?
I absolutely think it is. But you have to make sure that you're getting it to a certain level. Um, the more you can speak, obviously, the better it's going to, because then it goes from being a parlor trick that you can do to being something that you can actually use as a tool when you're dealing with these people.
Right.
And don't forget, you first walk the factory, it is going to seem a little bit like a parlor trick to them. They're going to be like, "Oh, wow, you speak Chinese." It's like, "Yes, I actually do." But as you keep on going, if you actually have this as something in your toolbox where you can understand what they're saying to you, and then also, very importantly, you can understand what they're saying to each other, you can really start to pick up on nuances about, okay, well, they are confident about telling me this information. They're not confident about telling me this information. You can see a little bit of the interplay between people who are actually in the factory. You can get a better judge of how things actually stand. You can be a better judge of that.
Right. And a story I frequently hear from Western businessmen who travel to China. One thing they tell me quite often is how helpless they feel when they're in a meeting and let's just say their Chinese counterparts are kind of talking amongst each other right in front of them or they're in the process of trying to explain a really important sales point and they're not sure if the point really got across and it's just like the word I hear a lot is just a sense of helplessness and I can imagine even knowing a little Chinese can really alleviate that issue.
Actually, it's one of those things where when you first get started, um, it might actually be good to what's the way I want to actually put this? You might still want to have a translator with you to be able to help you in these situations. And when I say a translator, sometimes it's good to have a third party person who's there, who's not involved with the factory and doesn't have any interest in trying to help out the factory. So they're going to be on your side, and then you can kind of use them to help you understand a little bit as you can listen in yourself. So they give you more time to be able to process the things that you're actually hearing as well, because like, oh, I need to have this person translate, even if you already understand. So it gives you more time to be able to think things through, and then as you get better and better and better at it, then you're going to be able to accomplish much more, and you're going to feel much more confident about what's going on in that situation.
Absolutely. And and following up on that question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think it is understanding or to having a basic understanding of the culture and some of the business customs?
I think that is actually huge when you're dealing with people here, and it goes beyond just okay giving a gift to the big boss when you come in and thinking everything's going to be okay because he actually said this is what's going to happen. You need to understand a little bit more about the way that the culture works, about the interplay between the people at the different levels in the factory or in the business that you're dealing with, because you might be meeting with the big boss when you're doing everything, but essentially it's going to be the lower people who are going to be making sure that everything actually happens for you. So if you understand the interplay between these different levels of people, which is very culturally based, then
Absolutely.
then it's going to be much more beneficial to you. That also means that take care of the people lower down as well if you can.
Yeah, I think people underestimate that. They spend so much time, with the decision maker that they forget there are actually people who are going to be doing making all of it happen.
Mm, that's a huge part of it.
So here's kind of a theoretical question. Do you think a foreigner or a Westerner who can speak some level of Chinese and has a basic understanding of the culture and the customs will have a chance of doing more successful business than one who doesn't at all?
All other things being equal, then yes, absolutely. Because it gives you more of an idea of what it is you're working with. You have a better understanding of the situation you're getting yourself into. You have a better understanding of uh, just about the way the whole system works. So if you can actually speak Chinese and you understand the culture that you're going to be dealing with, then you're definitely going to have an advantage.
That's really great advice. And now that takes us to our last question. Have you personally seen financial or business value from your Chinese skills and experience, with the culture and with these with your partners?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually for me, that's what a big part of what I can base my services for people on is the fact that when it comes down to it, I can go, not only am I going to be the representative, but I can be there, I can go directly to the factory myself. I can talk to people in the office, I can talk to the boss if I need to, I can talk to people on the work floor directly if I need to. And the fact that I have the Chinese language skills that I can use, that's what actually sets me apart from, say, other people that they might have talked to or they might have thought about using in the past. Is I feel very comfortable. I get a phone call, I need to go out, I need to deal with the situation, I can go there directly. Also, just from a cultural standpoint, knowing how things work, I can get to places. I don't have to worry about getting lost. They don't have to worry about bad things happening to me on the way out there or anything like that, because I feel comfortable getting to the places and then communicating with people at any level that I need to communicate with.
Absolutely, and I imagine a guy like you is such an underutilized resource because especially for Western businessmen who have no idea, the first thing on how to, you know, you know, even just like get to the factory, let alone how to kind of maneuver through all the all the language and cultural barriers. So I imagine it's been very helpful for you.
That's one of the things actually is if you're just coming over, another sense of helplessness I think that a lot of the businessmen might feel is when they first get here and they have to wait for the factory to come pick them up. They have to wait for the factory to do this. Everything is kind of at the whim of what the people there are doing. And if you have an understanding of the way things work and enough communication skills and wherewithal, then you can actually take care of a lot of those things on your own. And so you have a lot more independence when it comes to actually being able to work.
Absolutely. Well, Zach, the advice and your stories have been extremely interesting, and I'm sure our listeners are really going to benefit from a few of the nuggets in there. Thanks so much, for taking the time to talk with me.
No worries.
I hope you enjoyed the Chinese Business Breakthroughs interview with Zach Caney. I sincerely believe that if you follow some of Zach's advice, you will see results in your next business trip. As Zach said in the interview, trust, respect, and good relationships are key to doing better business in China. If you want to learn more about how I can help you bridge the cultural gap, gain trust and respect, and accelerate your business relationships in China, please enter your name and email on the right hand side of the screen and take your first step towards a business breakthrough in China. Thank you. 谢谢.